Hey y'all, this is Amy from the Dog Guide San Antonio. Welcome and thank you for tuning in today. I am here with Stephanie from Pep Up and Away, and our resident trainer here in San Antonio, and she's here to talk to us today about traveling with your dog. It is spring. I think a lot of us have the bug to get out on the road and do some sightseeing and traveling with our doggos, especially as summer comes up. That's big road trip season. So we're here to talk about some tips on what we can do to have a better experience with our dogs on the road with us. So thank you, Stephanie, for being here again and providing your expert insights. So what is your experience with traveling with your dogs? We were touching on this a little bit beforehand. But just to kind of make it relatable for everybody,
Yeah.
we can both share our experience there.
Yeah, I definitely wish that I had the opportunity to travel a little bit more with my dog. So we typically do small little adventures more in the city or right outside of the city. But of course, in the summer when I can get away, this past summer, well, that was almost like a whole year ago now at this point. Last July, we took a day trip to the beach and hung out there for a little bit, got back in the car and drove right on back. I like most of my stuff is just, hiking and doing things like that, kind of going to more remote areas, finding a new trailhead or a new park to kind of explore nature in. So most of my travel with my dog is a little bit more Texas specific and not too far of a road trip though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I haven't been out of Texas with my dogs. I have done like overnight and
Hmm.
or longer trips with my dogs, like out to West Texas.
Yeah. Oh,
And
I've been
and
wanting to
beach
do that.
trips are perfect with dogs too. So
Love the beach.
when you're traveling with doggos, don't think you have to make it some huge thing. A day trip is
Yeah.
something just to be as prepared for as traveling further. So
Yeah. Short and
um,
sweet.
yes, yeah. So with that in mind, I think one of the biggest things, if our dog is in the car for a number of hours, we've got to get them used to being in the car with us. So what are your
Yeah.
tips on getting your dog used to being in the car to make that the drive easier as well for both of y'all?
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a difficult question because it kind of depends on where you're starting off with your dog. So I'll kind of give some tips for the people who like their dog's nervous of the car. They don't want to get in the car, but not spend a ton of time on there because I think for the majority of people that might be listening, they kind of already have an idea that their dog doesn't mind being in the car. But one of my biggest tips is don't only go to like when you're preparing your dog to know what the car is, right? Don't only get in the car to go to the vet or to go to the groomer. What we accidentally do there, especially if your dog does not have a good relationship with going to the vet or to the groomer, the car becomes a precursor to, I know what's
Mm,
about to happen next, right?
yeah.
So making sure that we get in the car, and even if you just go around the block and come on back, or you're taking them to, you're going to go grab some food at the drive-through, making sure that it's a variety of different things that happened at the end of the car. Another thing to really consider if you have a dog that is already having some sort of a negative emotional response with the car is considering some sort of natural stress management or some sort of
Hmm.
calming tools. And I know we've talked a lot about that in some of our previous episodes. But two of my favorite things to use is one thing called Rescue Remedy, which is very situational. You don't have to give it to your dog all the time. So you can give it to your dog about 15 minutes before you're getting into the car. It's really easy to travel with as well. So for those of you guys that are going on road trips, take the bottle with you. And then as you stop for your potty breaks, administer a little bit more if you need a little bit more of that stress management. But I also really like pheromone sprays for the car as well.
Hmm.
It's odorless for you, so you don't notice it. And I mean, I don't know if it really has a fragrance or a scent to our dogs, but one of my favorite brands is called Adaptil, and they make a nice, easy spray that you can spray on like the bed or the blanket
Hmm.
or the sheet or whatever it is that your dog is sitting on, just to have some kind of that nice, calming oxytocin release, just to kind of take the edge off of that just a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, and I think one of the biggest questions when I'm talking to a client about if their dog is nervous in the car is it's kind of the chicken or the egg at this point when I'm asking this question. But is the question is your dog getting motion sickness? Because if
Mm.
that's an issue, then no matter what you do, you're not going to create a positive association because it's literally making your dog sick, right?
Yeah.
sometimes what we can do is play around with where the dog is located in the car. So maybe somewhere more central versus like
Mhm.
the back where everything kind of like swings around a little bit
Yeah.
too much. And so sometimes if we have too much of a motion sickness in the beginning, well, that creates a negative association, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So sometimes I tell people to offset that a little bit, get in the car, leave it in park, turn the radio on, put the windows down, and just feed your dog their dinners in the car, feed your dogs their Kongs or their bully sticks. So that way we're breaking down the environment to where you're in the car, but it's not moving, it's not crazy, we're not doing anything like that. So we're making it a
Mhm.
little bit easier. So taking that step by step process.
Yeah.
Um, but then, yeah, once we're actually in the car, definitely thinking about safety is going to be another issue. And that kind of goes along well with the motion sickness as well.
Mhm.
Is like my dogs, I have like a bucket seat for them. It's a big square and they sit in
Mhm.
it, and they have
Mhm.
attach them. So safety is always a really big thing to consider too.
Yeah.
Not only do we want our dogs to be safe in the unlikely event of an accident, but also it kind of can help them feel better,
Yeah.
especially if it raises them up and they can see out the window, or if it just gives them a better center of gravity because they have something to kind of lean into and move into. But safety is also another really big one as well.
So, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell them a little bit more about what a bucket seat actually is? You talked about it raising them up so they can see out the window.
Yeah, yeah, and this is kind of a little bit better for smaller dogs, but,
Mhm.
it basically looks like a big square bucket, and it's kind of raised about that like, it has a cushion, so it's mine
Yeah.
specifically has a cushion about this big, and then it has walls that are about the size of, like, my hands, right? So your dogs go in it, and it's just kinda like a booster seat, honestly.
Yeah.
And this one specifically, the seatbelt goes through like an actual car kid seat, right? Like the seatbelt
Mhm.
goes through in the back and you pop it in. So that way that specific thing is not moving around, but then it also
Mhm.
has clips to attach to your dog.
Nice.
So that way, if a collision happens or some sort of impact happens, your dog is in a safety belt.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
for bigger dogs, they make lots of different harnesses that have the nice seatbelt attachment that
Mhm.
goes through, or a special connector where one attaches to the harness and the other one goes directly into the seatbelt buckle.
Mhm.
Um, I don't have a specific brand or, specific product that I recommend to specific people, just because it kind of depends on your dog and kind of what you want in your experience. But definitely considering those, not letting your dog sit on your lap. Guys, please don't.
I can't do that. That really I can't drive if I'm doing that. Yeah.
One, it takes your attention off of your driving. But another
Mhm.
thing too, no one's planning for an accident. And
Yeah.
if you have an accident and your airbag deploys, your
Yeah.
dog's going to be the one that takes the brunt of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
for
Well,
sure.
and I feel like those seatbelt harnesses and the bucket seat, like you mentioned, are really good for dogs who want to just kind of wander all over the car.
Yeah.
Yes, that could be really distracting.
Yeah.
Terry, I have two dogs. I don't travel with both of them in the car very often,
Hmm.
if ever. I'm trying to think of a time when I have. But Terry will definitely like kind of sit still and like let taxes. It's still a little bit new to him, and he wants to
Sure.
be able to like wander all over. So
Sure.
that can be distracting for everybody. So having a seatbelt harness or that would be really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, and for those guys who like to kind of explore a little bit too much,
Hmm.
they might start to feel frustrated when they are attached to the seat, right? And now they
Yeah.
can't move. So consider your babysitters. Consider taking your bully sticks, your frozen Kongs,
Hmm.
your not pigs. I like pigs' feet. No, I don't like them, but they just don't last very long. But consider
Hmm.
taking your long-lasting, high-value chews with you.
Yeah.
Keep your
Yeah.
dog engaged, keep your dog distracted. And of course, if you don't maybe want to have something, as if you're taking a very long road trip or something like that, you might not have enough because we don't want to, cause an upset tummy by giving your dog bully stick after bully stick. So
Yeah.
consider finding some different things that maybe last longer than a bully stick, or
Hmm.
we sell a toy here that the bully stick goes into, so it kind of slows them down from just chomping on it. They have to like work to pull it out and do different things
Mhm.
like that. Frozen Kongs are great, but also you might be worried about the upholstery of your car or something like that. So just definitely having a good arsenal of different things that you can take with you to keep your dog distracted.
Yeah, good points. I especially liked earlier how you talked about just getting them used to being in the car, even if it's just sitting
Yeah.
parked and then going on smaller trips around town. But yeah, having all of those, basically having, I kind of imagine like having your diaper bag for your dog, like when you have
Definitely.
kids, like having your arsenal of supplies. So you mentioned, longer trips. So longer trips, you obviously need to build in some potty breaks sometimes to get out
Yeah.
and get a little walk in. So what are your tips on how frequently you should be doing that?
Yeah, I think it depends on the dog. So a lot of my answers, oh, well, it depends. Depends on the dog. Of course, if you have a younger kiddo who's maybe still going through some potty training experience and still learning that, you might want to be stopping more often. If
Mhm.
you have a hyperactive dog who maybe they can physically hold their potty, right, but they need to be a little bit more active because they are, I
Mhm.
don't know, a herding breed and they're a whole, 9 months old, you want to be getting out a little bit more frequently just for that exercise as well. Make sure that you have a proper leash on you for wherever you're stopping. Try to plan those stops along the route ahead of time. Luckily there's a bunch of awesome buckies. Take your poop
Mhm.
bags. You just never know if that place is going to be equipped with poop bags and different things like that.
Yeah.
So kind of the small essentials are really important. And I think one training tip that I have in this moment is when you're going and you're letting your dog explore a new area. I know a lot of people who, especially if they've invested in, doing group classes and training and things like that, have a little bit of understanding with your dog when you're trying to train in a new environment.
Mhm.
It's a lot for your dog to process a brand new environment and also still be able to comply with your requests of sit and down and X, Y,
Mhm.
and Z. It's good practice to definitely generalize your dog being able to do those different things in new environments, but to also understand that your dog is extra d- distracted and investigative, right? And so
Yeah.
give them a moment, let them sniff around. Because it's a new environment, you might have to take a step backwards in your training process, so you might have to do some luring all over again, even for something as simple as sit.
Mhm.
But just having a little bit of patience with your dogs if and when you're trying to work through different things like that.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're going to get whenever you stop, right? Maybe there's going to be other dogs there, so you're kind of working through that distraction of other dogs and a new environment and people, and there's traffic and this. It's important to go also armed with your high value training treats as well.
Mhm.
So that way
Mhm.
you don't wait for negative behaviors that you don't like. You still want to be trying to reinforce behaviors that your dog is naturally giving without you having to ask for them. But just,
Mhm.
you know, um, the absence of negative behaviors is a good behavior to reward.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. One thing I really like to do is train my dogs to sit and wait instead of
Mhm.
just when I open the car door and them jolting
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
because, I don't want them accidentally getting loose and running off. So I feel like that's a really
Absolutely.
good thing to train them kind of like the getting in and out of the car manners. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I love that one.
Okay, so we talked about being in the car and kind of taking breaks, the tools you should bring along with you to have in the car, a little bit about exploring new places. What about when you've arrived at your location and say it is someplace where you're staying at a hotel or an
Yeah.
Airbnb, and you need to leave your dog there for a little bit while you go off and go have dinner or go run
Yeah.
errands, or go to something that isn't dog friendly? What are your tips on leaving your dog in that hotel room or the Airbnb where they might not
Yeah.
used to be?
Yeah, so that first time that you do it, you don't know what to expect, right? You don't know if
Mhm.
your dog is gonna hoot and holler the entire time, because even though they might do really well when you leave the house, well,
Mhm.
they're used to the house, right? They know that environment very well. There might not be disembodied noises the way that they hear it in the hotel room or something like
Mhm.
that. If your dog's very exploratory and you leave and your dog gets nervous or anxious or bored, you don't want them to go chew up the Airbnb, right?
Yeah,
Because
for
it ruins
sure.
your deposit, and then it ruins it for everyone else because it's really hard to find a pet-friendly Airbnb.
Mhm.
But so I definitely recommend some sort of confinement, whether you're traveling with your crate or you're
Mhm.
traveling with an X pen. But of course, your dog needs to be comfortable being confined. So if you're
Mhm.
someone who, when you're thinking about what kind of life you want to have with your dog, and you're like, I really would love for my dog to go out and about, make
Mhm.
sure that you're just working that into something that they're used to. I get a lot of pushback from a lot of people because they think crating is cruel. But
Mm.
what's cruel is not training your dog how to be comfortable in the crate, because inevitably you're going to need to confine your dog,
Yeah.
even if it's just once in their life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so having, just kind of going through a little bit of that positive association. So I definitely think traveling with your confinement and making sure that your dog does well with confinement. Those
Mhm.
long lasting, high value chews that we talked about are going to be really important here, once again, to keep your dog distracted, to keep your dog entertained instead of them
Mhm.
hooting and hollering about you leaving. The pheromone sprays, once again, might be a really great idea here to spray the blanket that goes into the
Mhm.
with them. Adaptil, and I'm pretty sure some of the other brands as well. They usually make plug-in diffusers that you can
Mm.
plug into the wall if you have an outlet, kind of close by the
Yeah.
containment. That way you get a nice steady stream. So if you're going to be gone for a few hours, the pheromones do typically start to wear off. So
Mhm.
having something that can be giving a little bit of that burst of the pheromones. And of course, exercise. If you guys, especially if you just got out of the car from a long car ride and you're dropping your
Mhm.
dog off to go do something, you're kind of setting your dog up for a little bit of failure there. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Make sure you get your dog a good walk, a good sniffari. Let your dog walk and sniff. I think people undervalue the value of just letting your dog sniff around on walks. That mental
Mhm.
stimulation will tire them out just as much as going for those steps. But of course, when you have the time, the reason why you took your dog out on vacation with you is because you want them to do things. So maybe you spend a good amount of time during the day letting them be part of whatever activities you can let them be, tire them out,
Mhm.
and then that way you can leave them a little bit more peacefully in the evening while you travel, or while
Mhm.
you go and do things with maybe your dog can't go. Um, and I definitely think investing in some sort of really cheap pet cam, something portable, something that can go with you. Mine
Mhm.
$15 off of Amazon. Doesn't have to be anything, fancy. It just needs to be something that you can check up on your dog every now and then and make sure that you're not going to get kicked out of your hotel.
That is a really good tip. I don't use a pet cam at home,
Mhm.
and wouldn't have thought of that. So yeah, traveling with your dog someplace you don't want them to tear the place up or
Yeah.
be super loud.
Yeah.
That's a really great tip there. So
That's stressful too. You almost can't enjoy your evening if you're like, "Oh my god, I have no idea what's going back at the hotel." But if you had a camera, you'd be like, "Oh, he's sleeping. He's
yeah,
okay." But
yes,
if you start seeing some signs, you're like, "Hey, we gotta catch the check, and then we gotta go."
yeah,
And
yeah.
then how to better prepare for next time too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That is a great tip. Okay. What about maintaining a routine while you're traveling with your dog? How important is it to do that? Or is it just, everything's gone with the wind and just leave them by the seat of your pants? But how important is
Yeah.
maintaining those routines?
Yeah, I think it's hard to maintain a routine because, the reason why we're traveling is to get out of
Mhm.
our routine and do something a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I think it depends on, once again, on your dog, and how rigid they are about schedules and routines.
Mhm.
What I like to do, and the advice that I give my clients, is stick more to a routine and less on a schedule, right? Because if you feed your
Mhm.
dog at 7 a.m. every day, well, they can't tell time, but they know around what time dinner time's coming. So
Mhm.
6:58, your
Mhm.
dog's like, "Hey, man, can we get up?" Right? It's dinner. And it's funny that we're having this conversation now since we just had daylight savings time, because that
Right?
messes up
Yeah.
our dogs too a lot.
Yes.
Um, but of course, the more rigid your dog is in the schedule, and that if they can't cope well with changes
Mhm.
in a schedule, traveling with your dog might be a little bit difficult. So maybe you do want
Yeah.
to try to keep on the schedule as much as possible.
Mhm.
If you have more of a general routine with your dog, because the other thing too is, even though you keep your schedule the same, they're eating at the same times X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
The whole environment that you're in is literally completely different. So even that
Mhm.
small thing can be enough to kind of, stress your dog out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
While it's hard to do if you think that your dog does have a hard time adapting to changes and schedules, and you do want to try your best to stay close to as possible.
Mhm.
Um, but I think also, having small baby trips leading up to a big trip,
Mhm.
helping your dog adjust to something like that instead of, okay, well, now we're, out of state and this is going to be the worst vacation of my life. Take small beach trips and make sure that your dog's doing well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then I think also just knowing when to leave your dog at home. If you know your dog and you know they're not gonna do well with that kind of thing, or if you have more than one dog, like you and I both have,
Yeah,
yeah, and if it's just me, with 2 dogs, that would be a little too intense, but one-on-one or with
absolutely.
a group of people and 1 dog, but yeah, I think just kind of, when we're making those decisions on, do I take my dog to the happy hour with me? Are they going to
Yep,
be able to handle that? Is it going to
yep,
stress them out too much? Same thing with traveling, knowing
absolutely. I'm glad
when
that you
they're,
mentioned that.
yeah, yeah. Well, and then, yeah, so having that friend or family member who can watch your dog while you are traveling, or having a place to board your dog while you're
Yeah.
traveling. So, yeah.
Having those options for sure. I think one thing that I talk about with a lot of my clients is having realistic expectations because we
Hmm.
want to do certain things with our dog, but we're always missing the question of does my dog want to do those things?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, now that we're, on the better side of a pandemic, we're seeing a lot of that. People are like, I need my dog to go to daycare, but this is the first time they're seeing any sort of dog in 2 years. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
having to have really harsh conversations with clients, like your
Yeah.
dog doesn't like it.
Yeah.
Maybe having the dog walker come over instead. So
Hmm.
having places, whether it's friends or family, pet sitting companies, boarding facilities where your dog is comfortable,
Hmm.
maintaining a good relationships with those, and doing some forward thinking as well. We got a lot of last minute spring breakers.
Hmm.
That was really tough to deal with because once again we're having these new clients who their dogs have never been to a boarding facility, they don't socialize, this is the first time they're going to be around a bunch, but this is my only option.
Yeah.
Those dogs had a
Yeah.
tough time, and luckily we're
Yeah.
small enough to where we were able to handle it, and still give them a lot of that one-on-one attention. But setting those things up, there's a reason why we have a 2-day orientation for our boarders.
Mhm.
So they
Yeah,
can come in, set those meet and greets up with your pet sitters and your dog walkers to come meet the dog beforehand,
yeah.
and because you don't want to get caught in the now my options are super limited.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, you definitely wanna make a plan beforehand,
Mhm.
which reminds me, I have a road trip coming up, and I need to make plans for my dogs. Okay, so we kinda went through the ropes of, tips for road tripping with your dog. We have a few minutes here. Are there any tips on air travel with your dog? I know most of us probably don't do that. There's a lot of, like, size restrictions,
Yeah,
and it's very costly, so I feel like fewer people actually, fly with their dogs. It's
right,
a big undertaking, but
right.
if somebody is, traveling with a smaller dog on a flight,
Yeah.
any specific tips there?
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't have experience with this. I've never flown with
Mhm.
my guys. Flying gives me enough of my own anxiety. I don't want to have to worry about my dogs. And unfortunately, for safety reasons,
Mhm.
we can't prepare really well for that.
Yeah.
There are like service dog organizations that they can get on flights specifically for training
Mhm.
purposes, but people who don't have that authority or anything like that permission, it's really hard to prep for that because
Mhm.
there's a lot of moving parts to that.
Yeah,
The dog has
yeah.
to be able to be okay with suitcases moving around. You don't want your dog to be pulling you like crazy through an airport.
Mhm.
Just generally like being calm while you go through security, there's so many different things to consider.
Yeah, yeah.
And not even to think about, okay, now we're going to get on this thing that's going to be super loud. Like if it's loud for you, can imagine how loud it is
Yeah,
for your dog.
yeah.
Like, that's always one thing I consider and I think about. But taking off, it feels weird for you. Can you imagine what that feels like for your dog? At least you have an understanding of what's happening. Your dog's like, what the hell? Um,
Yeah.
so that one's really hard. Once again, because and Also, another hard thing is every airline has something specific that they got to do, right?
Mhm,
Some dogs,
mhm.
some of them require the dogs to go on the undercarriage. If that's your option, I say don't do it. It's better
Yeah.
for your dog to stay at home, please.
Yeah. If you're moving, that's one thing. If you're just
Yeah,
going on a vacation, that's a big undertaking.
yeah,
I think,
that's
yeah,
really
most
hard.
airlines, you need to have a smaller dog that you can fit in a carry case under a seat, and
Under
that
a seat, yeah, and
yeah,
he's got that.
yeah, yeah.
But once
Unless,
again,
of course, you have a service dog. I mean,
right.
those are different rules there, but
Right, right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And then, of course, those service dogs go through that specific training for stuff like
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
But once again, the biggest thing is the confinement there, making sure your dog's
Yeah.
comfortable in that carrier that you're taking them in,
Mhm,
having your stress management just in case, you just never
mhm.
know. And then, of course, any sort of choose long lasting things that your dog can enjoy. The other hard one too is really consider how long is your flight going to be,
Yeah, yeah.
because there's no potty breaks on that one. So you're either that person who has the stinky dog, or
Yeah,
you're gonna have to be thinking of other things. So maybe you take, your pee pads. Maybe you're taking your dog into the bathroom and putting a pee pad down every once in a while, seeing if they potty. But that's a
yeah.
really weird and unnatural environment, and so your dog might not.
Yes, yeah, that's a really great tip. So, best piece of advice there is probably to avoid air travel with your
Yeah,
dog unless you
keep it
absolutely
close.
have to, or if they're super chill and you've done it. I mean, then you don't really need these tips. But
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
my boyfriend's sister, her dogs travel often, and she got 2 little
hmm,
small ones, and because she's been doing it,
for
since
so
they're
long.
like,
Yeah,
I know exactly what to do, but, a
yeah,
lot of us don't have the frequency to practice it like that or to
yeah.
build it up from when they're so
Yeah.
small.
Yeah. So, well, those are some great tips on traveling either on a day trip or a longer road trip with your dogs. And we'd love to hear from you guys. Have you traveled with your dogs? Have you flown, road trip, day trip? Let us know in the comments where you've gone, what
Where's
your
your favorite place?
triumphs have been. Yes. What your biggest challenges have been. And Stephanie over at Pup Up and Away, she also has boarding there if you guys need it. We also have one of our Paw Pass partners, Poderosa Ranch offers that as well. And we'll share in the comments. We have some more resources that you guys can go check out. We have some blog posts on road trips for dog owners, some getaways in Texas, and then also local rivers to visit with your dog. Those are fun for a day trip as well. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the comments and next month for our next training session with Stephanie. Thank y'all.
Bye.